Hello everyone, welcome back. So in the previous videos we have already seen briefly about the president and then what his executive powers are, legislative powers, then judicial powers and also financial powers. So in this session we will be looking at the diplomatic powers, military powers and then importantly the emergency powers of the president. So let's begin with the diplomatic powers of the president. You know that we have ambassadors and high commissioners in various other countries. We send and receive ambassadors, diplomats basically. So all these diplomats are sent and received by the president, be it a diplomat sent from India to other countries or when it comes to receiving other diplomats from other countries, it's done by the president. And another diplomatic power is that all international treaties and agreements are concluded on behalf of the President of India. So whatever the international, you might have seen in newspapers, right? India entered into so and so treaty with another nation. So all such treaties and agreements are concluded on behalf of the President. Now, coming to the military powers of the President, President is the supreme commander of the defense forces of India. So he appoints the chiefs of army, navy and air force. He can also declare war and conclude peace. So these are the main military powers of the president. Now coming to the important one, emergency powers of the president. Emergency, Malayalatile parayum Adiyantaravastha. So there are three kinds of emergencies basically. Number one is national emergency or general emergency, which is declared under Article 352, 352. Then you have state emergency, which is often called President's Rule, which is declared under Article 356. And then third is the financial emergency, which is declared under Article 360. Now let's take up these emergencies one by one. The first one, national emergency or general emergency, which is declared under Article 352 of the Constitution. See, Article 352 of the Constitution says, if the President is satisfied that a grave emergency exists whereby the security of India or of any parts of the territory is threatened, whether by the way of war, external aggression or armed rebellion, he may by proclamation make a declaration to that effect. So it says President can declare national emergency on three grounds: war, external aggression or armed rebellion. Now this term armed rebellion was inserted by the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act. The original term was internal rebellion. See this, internal disturbance. This term internal disturbance, which was there originally, was actually a term with a wide connotation and it had a very vague meaning. So, and this was in fact, Indira Gandhi, when she declared national emergency, she in fact misinterpreted this term internal disturbance. So to avoid a misinterpretation the second time, we inserted or changed or replaced the term internal disturbance with the term armed rebellion. So this was done through the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act of 1978. So when a national emergency is declared, I told you there are three grounds to declare national emergency: external aggression, armed rebellion or war. So when national emergency is declared on the ground of war or external aggression, you call it external emergency. But when you declare it on the ground of armed rebellion, you call it internal emergency. Now, national emergency or general emergency may be applied either to the whole of the country or parts of it. That depends. So 42nd Amendment Act of 1976 enabled the president to limit the operation of national emergency to a specified part of the country. So after 1976, the 42nd Amendment Act, president may declare national emergency to a specified part of the country and not necessarily the whole of the country. Now coming to how was emergency declared. See, for the president, the declaring authority is the president, but for the president to declare national emergency, he has to receive a written recommendation from the Union Cabinet headed by the Prime Minister. Now note here, it is not the Union Council of Ministers, it is the Union Cabinet. Union Council of Ministers is the group of ministers. All ministers are part of the Council of Ministers, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ മന്ത്രിസഭ. പക്ഷേ within the മന്ത്രിസഭ you have a smaller body called the cabinet. So ministers with the cabinet rank. So usually senior ministers holding very important portfolios like defense, foreign affairs, finance, etc. are part of the cabinet. So they are a smaller group. So for the president to declare national emergency, he has to receive a written recommendation from the Union Cabinet headed by the Prime Minister. So earlier we did not have this provision. Originally, this provision of receiving a written recommendation was not necessary, which again was used by Indira Gandhi when she declared emergency. We made changes and we said hereafter for the president to declare emergency, he has to receive a written recommendation from the Union Cabinet. And the proclamation of emergency, which is done by the president technically, and this has to be approved by both the houses of the parliament within 1 month. So within 1 month of proclamation or declaring emergency, both the houses of the parliament has to approve the proclamation of emergency. So this is actually done with the purpose of preventing any misuse or this is done with the aim in mind that emergencies should not be done or declared hastily. Now I told you it has to be approved by both the houses within 1 month. And if it gets the approval of the parliament, then the emergency can continue for 6 months at a time. And this can be extended for indefinite period with the approval of the parliament every 6 months. So every 6 months you have to get the parliament's approval. Parliament here means both the houses. Now let's see what are the consequences or effects of the national emergency or general emergency. Both the terms mean the same. And this is declared under Article 352. The first consequence is that, see, once national emergency is declared, the president acquires a lot of extraordinary powers, and that is only during emergency. So let's take it up one by one. Before that, let me remind you, once the national emergency is declared, the federal constitution turns into a unitary constitution. The federal polity becomes a unitary one. Federal, you know, right? The arrangement whereby you have a center and then states as units. Paksha, in unitary you have a single authority, which is the central government ruling all over the center and the states everywhere. So federal now becomes unitary once the national emergency or general emergency is declared. So to take up the consequences or effects of national emergency one by one, the first one is that president can give directions to any state with regard to the manner in which the executive powers are to be exercised. So the president will tell the states as to how they should execute or how they should exercise their executive powers. Number two, the parliament will now have the power to make laws on all matters, including those subjects in the state list. See, usually parliament makes laws on subjects that are under the union list. States can make laws on subjects under the state list, And then you have a third list, which is the concurrent list, where both the center and the states can make laws. So this is usually done to avoid any difference of opinion between center and the states. So some subjects are placed under union list on which the center has exclusive authority to make laws, and some subjects are kept under the state list, like the police, so where the state government can make laws, and some subjects where both the center and the states can make law. Once national emergency is in place, there is no state list after that. Even if a subject falls under the state list, who will make law? The parliament will make law. But such laws will not be permanent in nature. So, which means that once the emergency ceases to operate within 6 months, such laws will be made will be naturally invalid. So, if Parliament makes laws on a subject which is in the state list, and this happens only during emergency, and after emergency ceases to operate within 6 months, after 6 months, such laws will be invalid automatically. So, they are not permanent in nature. Next is President can modify the existing pattern of revenue distribution between union and the states. You know that revenue is distributed between the center and the states based on the recommendation of the Finance Commission. But once the national emergency is in operation, the President can modify the pattern of distribution or sharing of the revenues between the center and the states. Now, next is that any law made by the state legislature which is contradictory to the laws made by the parliament will be void, which means that if the state assembly has passed any law which for some reason has become contradictory to the laws made by the parliament, then automatically such laws will be void or invalid. Next is, through an order, the President can suspend the enforcement of fundamental rights to the whole or any part of the country. This we had learned when we did the fundamental rights. We learned that except Articles 20 and 21. Article 20 is about protection in respect of conviction for offences, and Article 21 is about right to life and personal liberty. So, except these two articles, all other fundamental rights that you enjoy in any other normal circumstances can be suspended during an emergency, and this is also done by the President. And next, it shall be the duty of the union government or the central government to protect every state against external aggression or armed rebellion and to ensure constitutional rule in the state. So, it shall be the duty of the center to ensure that there is a constitutional government in every state, or to ensure that the states are protected from external aggression or armed rebellion. Then finally, President can extend the normal tenure of the Lok Sabha as well as the state legislative assembly. You know that normal tenure both of the Lok Sabha and the state assemblies is 5 years. So during emergency, the President can extend this normal tenure of both the Lok Sabha and the state legislative assembly, and this can be done for 1 year at a time. So one extension would be for 1 year, and and this extension cannot continue beyond 6 months after the emergency. So after 6 months, so only up to 6 months after emergency this extension can continue, which means after that you have to have fresh elections and fresh government coming to power. And see, we have one occasion when this normal tenure of the Lok Sabha was extended. This was during our emergency declared by Indira Gandhi, when that was the 5th Lok Sabha, where the tenure was extended for 2 years. So 1 year once and then again another 1 year. So that was extended for 2 years. Now the next is state emergency or President's rule. Malayalatile parayum Rashtrapati Bharanam. So this is declared under Article 356. Remember, don't confuse between the two. National emergency or general emergency was declared under Article 352, whereas state emergency or president's rule is declared under Article 356. It says, Article 356 says, if the president, on the receipt of a report from the governor of the state or otherwise, is satisfied that a situation has arisen in which the government of the state cannot be carried in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution, then the president may make a proclamation of emergency. See here, if the president, on the receipt of a report from the governor of the state or otherwise, is satisfied that a situation has arisen in which the government of the state cannot be carried out in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution, the president may make a proclamation of emergency. So, president has to be satisfied that the situation has arisen in which the state government cannot be run according to the provisions of the Constitution. So, this may be done based on the report by the governor or on any other basis. So, here it says, see, failure to, here it says, situation has arisen in which the government cannot be carried in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution, which means that in case of the failure of constitutional machinery in a state, a president's rule can be declared. Now, what amounts to the failure of constitutional machinery? See, failure to comply with or failure to give effect to any directions given by the union or the center can come under the failure of constitutional machinery. So, if center issues a certain direction to the state and state doesn't comply with it or state doesn't implement it, then the center can declare president's rule in the concerned state. And again, even this proclamation of president's rule has to be approved by both the houses of the parliament within 2 months. So, with the approval of the parliament, the president's rule will continue for 6 months, and again it may be extended for another 6 months, and like that to a maximum of, for a maximum period of 3 years it can be extended, not beyond that. So, president's rule maximum or state it can be only up to 3 years. So, 6 years, 6 months each time you can extend, and like that maximum for 3 years. And now let us see the consequences of declaring president's rule in a state. Number 1, president may assume himself all or any of the functions of the government of that state, or all or any of the powers vested with the governor of that state. Basically, president will assume or president will be in charge of the affairs of that particular state. Next, president may declare that the powers of the legislatures of the state shall be exercised under the authority of the parliament. So, either under the authority of the parliament or by the parliament itself. So, state legislature or the state assembly will now be either under the parliament or the parliament itself will be in charge. 3. The president may suspend any provisions of the constitution related to that state. Next, president has the power to suspend the freedoms under the 6 freedoms under Article 19 during the period of president's rule. So, only not all your freedoms, but those 6 freedoms under Article 19 can be suspended during president's rule. So, president may even suspend your fundamental rights, including your right to constitutional remedies, which was your right to move the Supreme Court or any other court in case your fundamental rights are violated. So, that is also suspended. Anyway, remember Articles 20 and 21 cannot be suspended at any cost. And finally, he can promulgate ordinances for the administration of the state when the parliament is not in session. If the president has declared president's rule in a state, and you know that once president's rule is imposed or declared, parliament will be, either the state legislature will be functioning under the parliament, or the parliament itself will be acting as the legislature for the state. So on such occasions, the president can promulgate ordinances. I had explained in one of the previous videos what an ordinance is. So, if the parliament is not in session, the president can promulgate or issue an ordinance for that particular state. You know, ordinance has the same effect as that of a law, but the difference is that it's not permanent in nature unless the parliament approves it. So, so what happens in reality is that at the time of president's rule, president dissolves the state council of ministers and the state legislative assembly. So he authorizes the parliament to pass bills and state budget when the state emergency or president's rule is in operation. So it's usually the governor of the state who carries on the administration of the state on behalf of the president. But president's rule is criticized by many because, you know, often we see that this has become kind of a weapon in the hands of the center to remove the state governments where any opposition party is in power. So that we have seen many a times, even in Kerala, when the EMS government was removed or dissolved, which was not constitutionally justifiable. Next is financial emergency, and this is declared under Article 360. 352 was national emergency, 356 was state emergency or president's rule, and financial emergency is Article 360. So Article 360 says, let me read it out for you. If the president is satisfied that a situation has arisen whereby the financial stability or credit of India or of any part of the territory thereof is threatened, he may by proclamation make a declaration to that effect. So when the financial stability of the country is threatened, president has the provision of declaring financial emergency for the whole of India, and again, like the previous emergencies, this has to be approved by the parliament within 2 months. For the national emergency, it was 1 month. For the president's rule, 2 months. And for the financial emergency also, it is 2 months. And once approved by the parliament, financial emergency will remain in force indefinitely until revoked. We saw that the other two emergencies, it had to be approved by the houses, both the houses, every 6 months. Pakshe, in case of financial emergency, once declared, it will be in force until it is revoked. And anyway, luckily we have not had any instance of a financial emergency in India. Now, a few consequences of financial emergency is, president can give directions to the state to observe canons of financial prosperity. So basically, states may be directed to be prudent when it comes to finances and observe canons of financial prosperity. Next is, the president may give directions to the state to reduce the salaries and allowances of all persons serving in the state. So salaries and allowances of all the government employees may be reduced once financial emergency is in operation. Next is, president can give directions to reserve all money bills for his consideration after they are passed by the legislature of the state. So once money bills are passed by the state assemblies, president can require or direct the states to uh, reserve all money bills for his consideration. Next is, president will be competent to issue directions to reduce salaries and allowances of all or any class of union servants, including judges of the Supreme Court and High Court. So basically, uh, the president may reduce the salaries of all central government employees, including the judges and other officials. So let us sum up this with a few criticisms against emergency powers. Number one is that during emergency, our federal structure turns into a unitary structure, and entire powers of the nation will be concentrated in the hands of the central government or the union executive, which is against the federal spirits of the constitution. And again, it is against the spirit of the constitution and destroys democratic foundation and values. Again, during emergency, president can suspend the right to move the court for the enforcement of fundamental rights. This means that all your fundamental rights or democratic rights are meaningless during emergency. And finally, during emergency, financial and other autonomy of the states are nullified. So these are the major criticisms against emergency. So thank you. This is all for today.